Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to the Nonprofit Association of the Midlands Guidelines and Principles webinar series. The Guidelines and Principles cover legal compliance and best practices in all areas of nonprofit management and operations. We built a website called guidelandandprinciples.org where you can find a wiki database with compiled research, background information, and sample documents in each of these areas. Also on the website, you can take online assessments and immediately receive prioritized action plans based on your responses. If you've not yet been to guidelandandprinciples.org, we highly encourage you to do so. It's free and open to all nonprofits. My name is Todd, and this month we're exploring topics in information technology with Drew Embry and Jake Molko of P&L Technology, who will guide us through information technology planning, budgetary considerations, and recommended platforms to satisfy your full range of needs. Drew is one of the co-founders of P&L, and Jake is a senior solutions engineer and trusted technology consultant. P&L has over 40 nonprofit clients and has performed over 1,000 technology assessments for organizations and businesses of all sizes to ensure they are investing intelligently for the future while remaining budget conscious and in line with their missions, so we know we're in good hands today. Before we dive into the presentation, I want to encourage you to ask questions and request clarifications throughout the presentation through the chat feature on the left side of your screen. Click Show Chat to enable and type your questions in the bottom left part of the screen. When we reach a good stopping point in the presentation or find a break, we'll be able to address your questions. Your identity will remain anonymous, so feel free to pose any question. And for the record, we're recording today's presentation and we'll make it available to watch on our website and YouTube channel. Okay, Drew and Jake, welcome. I want to thank you for being here with us today and to shed light on a difficult but essential subject for all of us. Would you tell us a little bit more about why you were compelled to present today?
Well, great. Thanks, Todd. We're really happy to work with NAM and be a part of this webinar, and hope we can deliver some valuable content that can really help you and your organizations move forward.
Thank you.
So what we're going to be talking today is delivering first-class IT on a nonprofit budget. We work with various local nonprofits. There are a set of questions that just seem to come up time and time again. And so we thought we would distill that down into two of those that we would then address today. The first question we're going to address that we get asked over and over again is how do we incorporate IT into our nonprofit organization strategic planning? So how can we do things like ensure our technology is aligned with our direction and growth and make sure it's meeting our organizational needs? We're going to keep that section fairly high level today and really just give you a framework with which to complete that organizational planning. The second item of our presentation today is, we get asked, Drew, this is awesome. I'm really glad we went through this high level organizational planning. I'm really glad we incorporated that into our yearly planning. But we also need practical, real world, turnkey solutions to implement many of the wishes that we discovered that our organization had for delivering first-class IT on a budget. So we have one solution that seems to be a keystone for almost all the local nonprofits that we thought we would also introduce you to today, and that is Microsoft Office 365, specifically with a component called Sharepoint Online. So before we get started, one of the things that we really wanted to discuss is, we know today that nonprofits need quality IT solutions. Really, all the successful for-profit businesses we work with, it's very rare to find one that hasn't applied the lever of technology and made, investment in technology and incorporated technology into their strategic planning to improve the productivity of their people and really get more done in less time. And what we're finding over and over again is really nonprofits have the same needs. Even though they're not for-profit businesses, they still have organizational goals that often may fall short if substandard IT systems and services and processes are in place. So now that we know we need that, what is the roadmap to delivering top quality IT? Well, Nonprofit organization leadership is often very good at what they do in their organization, but they're not necessarily well-versed in technology strategy. So we wanted to put forth today a simple plan that can really put you on the road to first-class IT. So the steps we're going to cover today are really, the first step is identification of needs. So figuring out what the organization really needs from the IT systems to support the mission of the organization. So you know which areas you really need to focus on and improve in order to meet those needs. The second step is to really just to assess the current situation. So you've identified in step one where you need to be, but what is the current situation? Where do we sit today? What do we currently have for IT systems and software? What's working well about the system that we have? On the other hand, what isn't working as well, and what do we need to do to really make that area of our organization serve us? And then the third step, after you've identified, where you're at, where you would like to be at, and where you're at today, is then to build a roadmap to get from point A to point B. So now that we've laid out the roadmap, let's take a look in detail at each one of the steps in that process that we found works very well. So the first step, as we laid out, is really the identification of needs. So the step that we found to be very helpful is to really gather the people from your organization for a kickoff meeting to discuss the current state of your IT systems, needs, and wants. So this could be done at your normal yearly strategic planning, or it could be a separate meeting where IT is the sole item on the agenda. One of the things we found is senior leadership must be involved in the process for it to truly be successful. The seniorship needs to understand the viewpoints from other people in the organization and needs to champion the IT process in order for it to be successful. But it's also very helpful to include key users of the technology system so you get a variety of viewpoints. So, other potential key people in the organization, if you have somebody that's particularly savvy on technology in the organization, it's a great idea to include them in the process as well, because the more viewpoints you have, really the better plan you can put together. So one helpful exercise that we found that's extremely good to run during these sessions is to kind of pull out the old business textbook and do an old-fashioned SWOT analysis. So SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and you'll walk through each one of those and see how those relate to IT. So to give you an example, a few common items that we've had come up from SWOT analysis sessions that I've helped facilitate, starting with strengths. So starting with strengths, what is working well about the IT systems today? What areas are running smoothly and providing the organization with the efficiencies it needs? So that gives the participants really a chance to discuss what's going well and what they like about the current IT system, so you don't actually accidentally change something that's working well. And after you've identified those strengths, then you move on to weaknesses. What areas of the IT system are not working well today? Perhaps it's IT support. Maybe you have problems that go unfixed for far too long when they do come up, so your people aren't able to work efficiently. Maybe you can't get a hold of the person or the volunteer that's in charge of fixing the problems when they come up. Another common one that comes up during weaknesses is system slowness. Maybe the systems are too slow and it's really difficult to get anything done, or even worse, they crash or lock up frequently. It would certainly be a weakness in the current IT system. Or maybe poor training. We've had organizations that they spend a lot of money putting in an expensive donor management software, for example, and they kind of skimp on the training. So the people, they've got this powerful software, not everybody knows how to use it. So it would certainly be a weakness of the system that could then be addressed if it's known and agreed upon. So after you finish up with strengths and weaknesses, the next thing is to move on to opportunities and threats. So opportunities, which area do we have significant opportunity to make the IT systems better and support the organization? One example would be mobile access. We hear this coming up a lot, especially now, and that's an opportunity that the organizations have identified where they need to make changes. I hear a lot, Drew, we've got some new younger people in our organization, and they want access from their iPads. They want to be out in the field and working from home and accessing their files and content from wherever they're at. And if we had that, we really feel that would add a needed benefit to our organization. So what's it going to take to do that? We also have nonprofits that they're managing their donors off a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet, so they know that maybe if they did bring in some donor management software, that they could really then improve the communication and the whole fundraising process, and probably even pay for itself over a period of time by implementing that software. So then after discussing opportunities, then it's time to move on to threats. So what are some current threats that, if not addressed, could really cause us some pain down the road? So things that come up frequently in this category are things like documentation. Hey, every time somebody comes to work on our systems, they don't really ever seem to know what's going on, and they have to spend a lot of time figuring out how things are configured. Where if the system was better documented, it could really streamline things for the organization. Maybe support's a threat. The nonprofit organization, maybe they don't have anybody to call if a problem does crop up, so when it does, they're dead in the water for a couple of days. That's really starting to become a threat to our mission that comes up. Maybe a volunteer works on the system, but they're not available or knowledgeable enough to help fully, and the organization really starts to understand that it is a threat. Data security can come up a lot of times during threats. A lot of nonprofit organizations find they either have no data backups, or the backups aren't working properly, or they stopped working at some point and nobody's really checking them. So it really makes some sense to discuss what would really happen to us if we lost our entire file system, all of our files, all of our PowerPoint presentations, all of our donor records. What would really happen if that occurred? What would our cost be around that? That's a big threat. We really should think about addressing that. And then kind of on the same vein, disaster recovery. That's another thing we get asked a lot. We're being asked to put together a disaster recovery plan, and we don't have one. What is the real threat to our organization if we don't have a disaster recovery plan, and something, heaven forbid, were to happen? A building burns down, or a pipe breaks and floods the building, a tornado hits. All those things certainly here in Nebraska can and do happen. So really at the end of that exercise then, you're going to have a really good view with a lot of input from others in your organization on where the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats lie around the IT systems you currently have in place. And that will be very useful as you go through this process, as we'll continue to talk about here.
I have a question. Now, so for small organizations where they might not have anybody who's extremely technologically savvy, so they might not know the full range of questions or areas that they need to explore when they're doing a SWOT analysis, who would you recommend inviting into the room? Is it worth hiring someone? How could that work? How could they get around that?
Absolutely. So the question that was typed in is, if it's a smaller organization and there's really nobody that has a whole lot of IT savvy there, who do you invite in the room to kind of help with that process? And we're going to talk about that in a little bit, involving a technical person at some point, but you don't necessarily have to have a technical person involved to do the SWOT analysis. What you're really looking for there is what are things that the people that are in the organization have identified as shortcomings or opportunities in order to improve the process. It can help, and you can certainly hire that type of expertise. Jake from our organization does a lot of that. And we can even facilitate those types of sessions for a nonprofit if they need help with that. But a lot of times, at least that initial analysis can be done by non-technical folks.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So after you've done the SWOT analysis internally, if you have a bigger nonprofit and you, of course, weren't able to involve anybody in that IT SWOT analysis or strategic meeting, what we've also found to be very, very helpful is to survey your entire staff. So everybody in the organization gets surveyed on their input on the system, their needs, their wishes, how they view the quality of the IT systems you have in place. Oftentimes the leadership and the management is the last to know when there's issues. And anytime I use this kind of survey, the leaders of the company, the organization, are floored with some of the input they get, or they really have their eyes open to sometimes even severe issues that their employees are just dealing with, and trying to be superheroes and trying not to be the squeaky wheel and deal with. But when the leadership really recognizes what the person's dealing with, they say, well, that's just silly. We could spend a little bit of money and get that person a new computer, or get them some help so they don't have to deal with that and they're able to be more effective in their roles. So those types of surveys can be done pretty easily by using online tools. There's several of them out there. The one I use typically is called SurveyMonkey. And those online tools, basically, you can just put in all your staff email and allows you to craft a quick survey that you can send to staff, that then they can tabulate, that they can take, and then you can tabulate and review, and then incorporate that feedback as well into the direction you're taking the organization's IT. So we recommend a fairly short survey. You know, that can vary, the questions of which can vary depending on the goals of the organization. But one thing we do always recommend including is what we call a start, stop, keep question in the survey. So that's asking all of your people, you know, what should we start doing in relation to the IT? So you may get some very similar responses to that you did when you did the SWOT analysis. So you may get, you know, hey, we really need to enable access from iPads so we can give presentations to people out in the field, or I really need the ability to be able to work from home. You know, last week I had a sick kid, and you know, I could have been very productive, but because we didn't have good systems, I wasn't able to do that. On the other hand, what should we stop doing with IT? Sometimes you get some people that will identify processes that just don't make any sense, or things that maybe made sense 5 years ago, but they don't anymore due to the changing situation. And it's great to get the input on that. The last part of that is then the keep question. What are we doing that we should keep doing? So again, that's kind of similar to the strengths in the SWOT analysis, where you're getting input from the people that actually use the systems that you put out there. You know, what do they like? What do they want to make sure you keep doing? So after you get those survey results, you can tabulate those. Sometimes you get some really good suggestions. Some you get the same suggestion from everybody, which typically tells you that that's probably an important place to look. And then you can put that input together with your SWOT analysis before moving on to the next step. So that's typically the first step in the process we talked about, really just identifying the needs of the organization. The second step, as I mentioned, is really an assessment of the current situation. So most organizations, most nonprofits, this kind of comes back to the question that Todd asked us a minute ago, they will probably require outside help to complete this step, you know, unless the organization is very small, or maybe they have significant access to technical expertise. So what happens in this assessment is a qualified engineer will come in and review your entire system. So the software you're using, you know, are you properly licensed for that? Take a complete inventory of all your systems. You know, look at the warranty status, the manufacturer's warranty on your server and your PCs. Look at the software versions, making sure they're still supported. Making sure the updates that come out, the critical fixes, including security fixes, are being applied properly. The data is backed up, that the backup's being done to the system. Are they being done? Are they being done properly? How's the security of the organization? Many of the nonprofits we work with somewhat protected information. You know, list of kids they're working with, you know, non-privileged kids, and that, you know, those lists and those names can't get out there. And they'll look at just really the overall configuration. And in addition to just documenting the entire configuration, they'll also perform a risk assessment that they see from a technical perspective. And this assessment can necessarily be quite complex, you know, as IT systems can often be complicated. The technical assessment that we use, that Jake frequently does, you know, has over 300 items on it that we document and inspect. And really, if that's not done, the assessment really isn't done from a very complete perspective. So at the end of that technical assessment, then, those findings will be delivered to the leadership of the nonprofit organization. And sometimes they're delivered at the conclusion of the assessment, but oftentimes they're tabulated and put into reports that then can be delivered to the leadership of the organization. So one thing to point out too is the assessment can often be budget sensitive. Many qualified IT companies, you know, if you're thinking about, especially if you're thinking about working with them on a longer term basis, will offer a free or a low cost technical assessment, you know, including P&L Technology. So if this is something that you think your organization needs, we definitely invite you to give us a call, and we can talk you through it and either help you or point you in the right direction. We never charge for anything like that. So really at this point then, you will have completed your analysis with your folks and kind of know where you want to take the organization. and you will have had a complete assessment done, so you really know exactly where you sit today. The next step then is really to put together the roadmap to move from the current situation to the desired situation. So oftentimes, the necessary changes that you need to make to support your goals or to remove risks from things you found, like perhaps no backups running or enabling mobilization or all those other things that maybe you have identified during the planning process. A lot of times those can be implemented in a single project, depending on how complex it is and if the budget's available to do that. And that can be a really nice way to handle that, to get all the necessary changes completed at once, kind of go through the pain of change and implementation all at once, and then really start realizing the full benefits of an optimized IT system can bring to your organization. Other times, due to budget constraints or timing constraints, the long-term roadmap can be broken up into a series of phases. So you can then work with your IT experts that did the assessment, incorporate the goals that you came up with during your planning, and work to break that up into a series of phases. So, the first phase often then will involve the most critical items that came up during your SWOT analysis, during your strategic planning, and either remove the serious risks that were found in the organization or implement the items that were identified as the most critical to the organization to give them that technical edge that maybe they don't currently enjoy, or those new features or new capabilities they don't currently have. Then as far as the plan, then subsequent projects can then be addressed and put on a plan to address some of those less critical items that the organization still wants to implement, as those budgets come available. What we found working with nonprofits is a lot of times those phases involve fundraising. A lot of nonprofits we've worked with, they've got a couple of donors in mind that maybe they work in the technology industry, or they kind of have a bent for technology, and they're willing to fund some or part of those changes that come up. So a lot of times they're like, we have the budget this year to do these two phases, and next year we're going to fundraise to do the other steps. But by breaking it into budgets or into phases, they can get some of the benefits now, remove some of the risks now, while still having a plan to get to the promised land, so to speak. After those phases and those budgets are identified, then each phase is implemented with an implementation project. So kind of the process for that is typically just to identify a qualified company. Maybe it's the individual that did your technical assessment earlier, or an individual, a volunteer, or someone along those lines, if they have the ability to then complete that implementation project and ensure good project management is applied to the project so it's a success. One of the things that we really stress to leadership if they are making a change or introducing new software or new features in the organization is just to make sure that training isn't neglected. It's of critical importance, and we often see it kind of brushed aside. And what we found is it doesn't do much good to have a shiny new system if nobody knows how to use it. Or if the staff, if you put new features in front of the staff and they're not properly trained, they get frustrated and they quickly stop using the new features because they weren't shown how to use it properly. And then the leadership's frustrated because they made an investment in a new solution that then isn't paying the benefits that they thought. So definitely make sure that the training is brought to the forefront and not left to an afterthought or a down the road item when putting out a new system. Also, in making changes to the system, we definitely recommend documentation be thought of as well. It kind of goes in the same category as training, where it's often neglected, but it's of critical importance moving forward. So anytime you're having any work done on your system by anybody, a volunteer that has a technology ability or an organization, make sure that your technology partners are doing that documentation. People come and go, especially in the technology industry. Volunteers move on, they get full-time jobs. Technology people, a person who's working on your system, they take another job next week. And if they haven't done their documentation, you're going to kind of start from scratch the next time you get somebody else to come into the system. So, make sure your partners are doing that, and make sure you either get a copy of that or have comfort you can get that down the road if you need it. Kind of going also into the theme of documentation is then anytime you're doing IT work, it's a good idea to make sure you put in the policies and procedures in around those things. So policies, things like an acceptable use policy. Do you have an acceptable use policy that all of your staff has to make sure they understand what is an acceptable use of the system is and what isn't an acceptable use and what the expectations are? Do you have disclosure agreements in place with your staff so they know what information they can and can't disclose, especially in an electronic format? Things like disaster recovery plans. Do you have a disaster recovery plan, even if it's just a 1 to 2 page document that kind of shows you put a little time and forethought into what happens if something were to happen to your building or your IT system. One of the things I was very pleased to see when I was working with Todd on this is NAM has kind of thought of a lot of this for you. So if you go out to their NAM Wiki, which I'm sure Todd will point you at, there's a lot of those templates and some pretty good starting points out there that are available to you so you don't have to invent the wheel from scratch. Also, if you're working with a technology partner, they undoubtedly will have some of those templates or can help you put those together as well. Okay, so we've kind of come to the end of the strategic planning process. We've discussed how you gather everybody together to identify where you need to take your IT system. We've discussed how to find out where you are today and making sure you have a technical assessment done so you fully understand the capabilities and risks associated with your system. And then we talked at a high level how to put together a roadmap with phases in order to address those types of shortcomings. What I'm going to do now is turn it over to Jake from P&L Technology, and he's going to show some specific IT systems, again, if you remember back from the first slide, that we found typically have just become a real keystone of the nonprofit world for various reasons. So with that, Jake.
All right, thanks, Drew. Again, I'm Jake at P&L Technology, and I'm a solutions engineer here and a consultant. So Drew just provided a really great framework to you all that if you follow it and you're diligent about that, it's going to put you in a really good position to start taking action on some of your IT initiatives that you've uncovered. And really, that's half the battle. Once you know where you want to be, all that's left is to select the technology that's going to get you there and implement it, as Drew said. So what we wanted to do the second half of this webinar is provide and demonstrate some practical solutions that other nonprofit organizations have already been using to not only simplify their IT environment and address some major challenges that they've traditionally had maybe with their IT systems, but even provide some additional capability that can help the organization work more efficiently, capabilities that they might not have had before. Again, once your organization has determined what IT-enabled goals you want to achieve, you have to figure out how to implement them. And traditionally, or at least in the past, this has been easier said than done. And this next slide here I put together a list of some of the common things that come up in these discussions that cause a lot of uncertainty, anxiety, and frustration, and are typically viewed as really big challenges and hurdles to overcome. So on this list you have things like servers. How do I know what kind of server I need or if I even need one? How much should I pay for one of these things, and how long should I expect it to last once I purchase it? And then I have to worry about who's going to manage it, take care of it, apply updates, and make sure that it stays up and running for us. Another thing on this list is questions with regards to my data. How do I ensure that the right people have the right access to the data that they need to do their job? And how can I make it easy for them to access this data, both inside the office or maybe working remotely, either from home or when traveling or otherwise off-site? And then, of course, how do I make sure that my data is secure? Another really common challenge that organizations face is with regards to backups and disaster recovery, as Drew's already pointed out. How can I make sure that my data is actually being backed up and be confident in that solution? What kind of backup solution makes the most sense for us? How often should I take backups? How long should I keep my data? How fast should I be able to expect to restore data in the event that I lose something? And what happens to my data if disaster strikes? These are all really common questions that have been traditionally kind of hard to figure out, especially if you're non-technical. There's also questions about licensing that can be a challenge in itself to figure out if you're legal, what licenses do I need to purchase, do I have the right ones, and then how do I keep track of all this stuff to make sure that I stay in compliance. Of course, upgrades are another major challenges that people face when dealing with IT. How frequently do I really need to upgrade my software? And what's that going to cost? If you have a server on site or a backup infrastructure, you have to worry about refreshing that as that equipment ages. And that leads to kind of the next point on this list is budgeting. How do I budget for all this stuff? If you have that complex of an IT environment, frequently people can get surprised as maybe equipment fails or unexpected budgeting items come up with IT that especially as a nonprofit organization, it can be really difficult to overcome some of that stuff if you hadn't been planning for it. So getting back to what we're going to demonstrate here, imagine if you could eliminate some of the worry and frustration and anxiety about some of the items on this list. And that's what we're here to show you today. There's a product on the market, and it's part of the Office 365 suite from Microsoft called Sharepoint Online. And we believe that it's a product that if you adopt it, you can potentially eliminate some of these challenges and concerns and simplify your IT environment. So that being said, what is Sharepoint? So I'll give kind of a high-level explanation of what that is. It's basically a cloud-based collaboration center where you and the other people in your organization can store files and even edit those right from within a web browser anywhere that you have an internet connection, regardless of your location. So how can SharePoint practically help our organization? Well, as we just said, it has the potential to reduce some of the frustration about some of the items on the previous slide, or at least a portion of them. But in some cases, you could reduce the worry for all of those items, depending on your particular needs. SharePoint, as we said, can help you store all of your files on the cloud and edit it from anywhere that you have an internet connection, not only from a PC or a laptop, but even from mobile devices like your iPhone or iPad or something like that. SharePoint provides the ability to collaborate with other employees in real time. You can have multiple people working on the same document at once, which is a really great feature that we're actually going to demo for you today. You have the ability to sync copies of your files that are in the cloud and sync them to your PC so that if you find yourself in a place where you don't have an internet connection, you can still get work done. So our goal really is to demonstrate this technology and hopefully spark some ideas for how each of you could use this in your organization to help you simplify your IT environment, reduce frustration and uncertainty, help you budget better, and even add some additional capability. So with that said, let's take a look at this. I'm going to actually share my screen and show you how we at P&L Technology have implemented this for ourselves. And so I hope you can get some ideas about this. So at this point, you should be able to see my screen. And what we're looking at right now is a subset or a sub-feature of SharePoint called OneDrive. And you can kind of think of this as your own personal space to store your documents. Maybe you can relate it to the My Documents folder or your desktop folder on your computer. So this is an area where you can keep important files that maybe otherwise wouldn't need to be shared with the rest of the company, but you still want to have access to. So as you can see, we're looking at my OneDrive, and I've got it open right within a web browser. But the cool thing is with OneDrive is that you can actually get to it. If you don't want to use the web browser, you can get to it right from within Windows Explorer and treat it as another folder on your computer. So if I click on my OneDrive here, you'll see that it's an exact replica of what we see in the online version. So if you're more comfortable working with files that way, that's an option for you. And as I add and edit files in one side, it'll automatically sync and update on the other side. So that's a really great feature. And the cool thing is that you can just use this like any other folder on your computer that you've been accustomed to working with. And you can drag and drop files in here and all that sort of stuff. So you might be wondering about backups. Since this is all in the cloud, how can I be sure that this is all being backed up? Well, that's the beauty of it. It is all in the cloud, and it's managed by Microsoft and their cloud data centers. So they take care of all the backups for you. And you can even configure it to keep different versions of files. So if you accidentally delete a big portion of your document or otherwise mess something up accidentally, you can go back to a previous version and be up and running in a matter of seconds if you choose. So that's OneDrive, which again is kind of a personal document space for your own stuff. What I'm going to show you now is what's called a team site, which is designed to share files across your entire organization. So this is P&L Technology's team site, and obviously the first thing that's noticeable is the big calendar that we have in there. So I'll talk about that first. In addition to storing documents in your team site, you can actually set up different shared calendars that everybody in the organization can view. So this particular one tells us who's on call for a particular week or who's on vacation. And the really cool thing about these calendars is that you can connect them into your Microsoft Outlook, so you maybe don't have to browse to the website to view what's in here, and I'll show you that.
Well, quickly, a question just came in. How much storage space do you get on OneDrive?
That's a great question. Microsoft, previously it was 25 gigs of space that was included with this plan. Last month they increased that to 1 terabyte.
Wow. Per user?
Per user.
Wow.
Yep, for your personal space. So even laptops today and computers sometimes aren't even shipping with hard drives that big. So, and that's the great thing about it, is that as this service becomes easier for Microsoft to deliver and their costs go down, we've seen over the years that Microsoft has passed that on to the consumers in the forms of more storage or additional features and things like that. So I would only expect the amount of storage to continue to increase. But here is my Microsoft Outlook, and you'll see that this is the calendar that we saw over here on the Sharepoint site. It's an exact copy. And if I make updates or changes within Outlook, it'll show up on this calendar and vice versa. So I figured I would show that to you since that's the big feature on our landing page. But take your attention over to the left side of the page under where it says libraries there. These are what SharePoint refers to as document libraries, but you can kind of think of them as folders or shared folders that you might already have on an existing file sharing system that you might use. So it's a familiar file and folder structure that you're already accustomed to, except we're doing all this right within a web browser. So you don't have to have any special software or a specific type of computer to be able to access all this. You can access it from any device that has a web browser on it, including a tablet or a phone or anything like that. So I'm going to go into one of our document libraries here. I'll go into the sales folder and the demo folder that we've set up. So again, we see a couple of different files in here. And I want to reiterate that it's very easy to upload files to SharePoint. I can go into my computer and just drag a file in there and have that uploaded. And I also want you to notice that there's different, SharePoint is capable of storing many different types of files, including Word files, Excel files, PowerPoint, even zip files and PDFs. As we can see, if I back up here, we have a zip file and a PDF in there. So really, just about any kind of file that you work with, SharePoint has the ability to store.
Will it store multimedia, like video and things like that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
The question was, would it store photos and videos and other multimedia files? And it definitely can. I have folders myself that I store pictures out there and things like that. Keep in mind that this is running over an internet connection, so you do have the ability to store videos out there, but if you're working heavily with video, making edits and changes, it might be best to do that on your local computer and then upload the final copy once you're done.
Great.
So you'll see a few buttons up here that we can click, and if I click this new button, you'll see that it gives me the option to create a variety of different documents right within SharePoint. So I'm going to go ahead and click Create a New Word Document, and you'll notice something really cool here. It opens up a web-based version of Microsoft Word right within my web browser. I don't even have to have Microsoft Office installed on my computer, which is just really cool. So I can give this document a title. I'll call it Test. Type in some things. And you'll notice that there's no Save button. You see it says Saving there at the bottom of the screen. So it saves your changes as you type them in real time. So if you've ever had a situation, I know I have, where I've spent maybe 20 minutes, a half an hour or more on this really important document, getting it all finished and ready to go, and then something happens to your computer and it crashes, and you have to retype all that stuff, and it's just a sinking feeling that you get. That goes away with SharePoint and Microsoft Word Online and any of the other Office programs out there as well. So I'll go back to this document library, and you'll see that my new document has created there. It tells us when it was modified, even down to the seconds level. It says I modified it just a few seconds ago. So that's really cool, and it shows you who the last person was to modify that document. So what about sharing? How do I share these different documents within the people in my organization? Well, it's really cool. Obviously, the people in your organization on this team site, depending on how you've set up the permissions, very similar to a typical file sharing structure, will be able to see whatever's put out in these different document libraries. Now, it's important to notice that I may have document libraries where I only want specific groups to be able to have access to. Maybe you have a marketing department or HR or a management folder. You can apply specific permissions so that only certain individuals are able to get in there. But otherwise, everybody in the organization would have access to stuff stored out here. Now, a really cool feature that can really save a lot of headache and time is that you have the ability to share anything in your SharePoint environment with somebody outside of your organization. So we use that internally and share specific folders with the people that we consult with on our PR and marketing and things like that. And they can have then direct access into folders that are stored in our SharePoint system, and it allows us to collaborate very seamlessly with them, even though they're not, inside P&L Technology, so to speak. And so I'll kind of demonstrate that here. Let's say I wanted to share this spreadsheet up here. I would go over here, click Share, and then I simply type in the email address of whoever I want to be able to work with that document. And over to the right, you'll notice that I can assign different permissions to them. I can either give them the ability to edit and make changes to that document, or just kind of view and read only permissions. You'll notice down here that I have the option to require sign-in, which means that if I wanted to share, let's say, that document with our marketing agency, but I wanted to make it secure, I could require them to sign in with a username and password before they were able to view that document. And it's free for them to create an account if they need to do that. So we've seen applications for that feature across a lot of different organizations that we serve. Some accounting firms come to mind where maybe in the past their clients would bring their big tax returns to them via a USB drive or something, and they would actually have to drive it out there or mail it because it was simply too big to email, or maybe they were worried about the security of that. SharePoint gets around that because you can upload those otherwise bigger files that you couldn't email and then share them directly with that person. You can check that box to make them sign in, and it's very secure. It can eliminate a lot of that hassle. You can have, obviously there's applications for marketing there as they work with larger graphics files and even video files. that you can't email. And we have architectural clients that could use this by uploading building plans and things like that. So there's a variety of different applications for this, and I'm sure you guys could come up with some that would work great for you too. There's also a feature here that's really great. You can email simply a link of this document to people rather than emailing the document itself. So think about times when maybe you've had documents where you had multiple people that needed to provide input on this document. Maybe previously you would send out that document to all these people, and then you'd start getting replies with the changes they've made, and all of a sudden you have 8 or 10 different copies of this document, and they're all different. SharePoint gets around that because by simply emailing a link to these people, say if I emailed it to Drew and Scott and a couple other people, Drew could go in there and make his changes, and then if Scott came in and clicked on that link later, Scott would already see the changes that had been made to that document. So that it eliminates the hassle of having to recompile all that information and it gets sent back to you. It's very real-time collaboration. So let's go into a little bit of a demonstration about how we work with documents within SharePoint. I'm going to click in to this Excel spreadsheet here that I have. And you'll notice that when I do that, it opens up Excel Online, again, right within my web browser. I'm not actually running Excel on my physical computer here. And it opens this up in kind of a read-only format, so I don't accidentally make any changes or make a typo or something like that. Off to the side, there's also some social collaboration features that allow people to make comments on different documents or provide input maybe without editing the content of the document itself. And that can be a nice feature if you're looking for input on a document that you've put together. So let's actually edit this document here. When I click Edit Workbook up here, and this works the same whether it's a PowerPoint document or a Word document that you're working on, I have two choices. I can either edit it in Excel Online, which is this web-based version of Excel that we're looking at, or if I have Excel installed on my computer, I can click that and it will open that up, download that document from SharePoint and allow me to use the full-blown version of Excel. And that might be useful if there's some advanced formulas or maybe macros or things like that it would be helpful to have that feature set. But right now I'm just going to click Edit in Excel Online, and it brings up a bunch of the familiar features that you're used to seeing in the version of Excel that you work with on your desktop. I can change fonts, I can highlight things, the alignment, I can even do formulas in Excel Online if I choose to do that. So I'll go down here and just type some things in. And I can tab and do all those things that you'd expect to be able to do in a desktop version of Excel. And again, once I've made those changes, I don't have to save or worry about saving that document. They're saved in real time directly back to the cloud environment. So another really cornerstone feature of SharePoint Online that we want to demonstrate is the ability to have multiple people edit the same document at the same time. So Drew's actually on his computer, he's in Excel Online, and you can see that he just popped up over here on my screen. It says Drew Embry is now editing the workbook. And if you'll notice, there's actually two cursors on the screen now, and I can hover over and see that Drew is currently editing specific cells of the document, and I can hover and see exactly who that is. You can have more than two people. I've had up to 4 people at once doing this, no problem, and you can have even more than that. So Drew's literally updating the spreadsheet at the same time that I can be doing it. And this is just a really great feature. I use this internally to give you kind of an example. We had a project of ours that was wrapping up towards the end stages, and we had open items that cropped up that we needed to take care of before we left that particular project. So I came up with a punch list in Microsoft Excel Online. I shared that with our particular project engineer and also 2 clients who, as they realized that issues were coming up, they would edit this spreadsheet on the fly. And at one point, I think all 4 of us were in it at the same time. I would see issues being typed in by the client, and I would assign that a priority and help get that to the right person to make sure that those were taken care of, without people running around with maybe 3 different notebooks or a bunch of emails flying around or something like that. And it was really, that's when it really hit me how powerful this particular feature was. All this functionality that you see in Excel Online is available if you choose to use this on a tablet like an iPad. So that's a really great feature as well.
Now, what happens when you're collaborating and somebody comes in and they accidentally delete a bunch of work that you've put in, or how, you know?
Yep. So the question was, what happens if you're collaborating with multiple people and they accidentally maybe delete an entire page of something that you just spent an hour working on or something like that? And that's where the versioning feature of SharePoint comes in that we talked about. If something like that happens, you can simply revert back to the most recent version that you saved and be back on your way. So I'm going to go back to our slides here. And I want to connect the dots back to what we previously talked about. If you remember this list of common things that are typically very challenging and frustrating and time-consuming to think about when you think about your IT infrastructure. Let's talk about how SharePoint can address those challenges for each of these items that we talked about. So I'm talking about servers. With all of your data in SharePoint in Microsoft's cloud, it's completely possible to get by without having an expensive file server on site. If your organization doesn't otherwise need a server on site, you can upload all your files to SharePoint and eliminate that line item from your budget and having to worry about buying that equipment and then refreshing it in 3 to 5 years when it's ready for replacement. So imagine some of the cash flow that could free up for you. Let's talk about data with relation to SharePoint and how we can address some of those challenges. There's issues with permissions on your data. So not only can we set permissions for our internal users on SharePoint, but we can even do it for external users who we choose to share our content with. We talked about making sure that the data is easy to access for your people in the organization. So SharePoint obviously addresses that, because if you have a web browser and an internet connection, you have your files. Or even if you use the syncing feature, you can still work on files if you don't have an internet connection at that time. There's no cumbersome VPN connection to set up or any hoops to jump through if you want to work on your files outside of the office. And since it all happens over commonly used web protocols, you don't have to worry about maybe being blocked if you're at a hotel or an airport or some other location where they typically lock those networks down a little bit more than most. There's also challenges with data security that SharePoint can address. Microsoft obviously has various clients in the medical, government, and other highly security conscious areas. Therefore, its data centers have to abide by really the strictest security standards out there. And in reality, Microsoft's data center is going to be a lot more secure than probably what a typical nonprofit organization could achieve with their own technology and budget. So there's peace of mind there with regards to your data security. One of the other items and challenges that we hit on was the challenge of backups and disaster recovery. So how does SharePoint address this? Well, since Microsoft manages the backup and retention and versioning of those documents that we talked about, all of a sudden you don't have to worry about purchasing any expensive on-site backup hardware. Maybe you've had tape systems before or had to worry about external hard drives and things like that. So since that's all taken care of in the cloud with SharePoint, you don't have to worry about assigning somebody to rotate tapes or make sure that the data gets taken off site every night, which can easily get overlooked if maybe that person goes on vacation or something like that. Additionally, there's no additional fees for having the data backed up out in the cloud. It's again already taken care of and included with the Office 365 subscription. Additionally, all of your data is stored in Microsoft's data centers, and they have several throughout the country that kind of fail over to each other. So if there's ever a problem in one of the data centers, you can rest assured that the other one will likely take over, and you can continue working and probably won't even notice that there was ever a problem. And with regards to disaster recovery, if your office is ever struck with a natural disaster, employees all they have to do is find a place with an internet connection, whether that's home or Starbucks or wherever it might be, and they can pick up on their documents right where they left off before that disaster happened. One of the other challenges that we addressed previously was with regards to licensing. So how does SharePoint and Office 365 help us with that? Well, Office 365 is a subscription plan with a monthly fee that entitles users to, in some cases, the most recent version of the Office 365 programs. If you just use the online versions, you can rest assured that you're always going to have the latest version with the latest capability. And you don't actually have to purchase Office licensing like maybe you've done in the past. And some plans, which we'll talk about and show you, also include the desktop versions of Microsoft Office, so that if you still want to have that installed on your computer and be able to use some of those advanced features, you can do that, and your subscription will entitle you to the latest versions of those as well. So with it being a subscription plan, all of a sudden it becomes much easier to budget for these types of expenditures. So what about upgrades? We talked that upgrades to the platform are applied automatically and seamlessly by Microsoft. So as new features are released, they automatically get applied to your environment with no downtime, and there's no additional cost or project fees associated with achieving those upgrades. And as we talked about previously, as Microsoft's cost of delivering the service continue to decrease, they have been passing on the benefits to the consumer in forms of additional capacity or new features. So at this point, you're probably wondering, what does this SharePoint Online and Office 365 stuff actually cost me? Well, this is one of the real benefits of being a nonprofit organization, is because everything that you've seen today that we've demonstrated, Microsoft has been providing free of charge to qualified 501c3s. Now you'll notice that I put a little star there. If you don't currently utilize Office 365, you're likely going to want to engage a professional to help you move your files over there and make sure that the transition goes really smoothly for you. So something like that would be maybe a one-time implementation fee. But once you're on Office 365, all you would have to worry about is that monthly subscription. And so if you only want to use the online versions of the software, again, Microsoft has been providing that free of charge. Now, if you are an organization who would still like to utilize the desktop versions of Microsoft Office, that's simply an additional plan within Office 365. And for nonprofits, Microsoft has been providing that for $5 per user per month. Traditionally, if you're a for-profit enterprise, that plan would be $20 per user per month. So that's severely discounted, and that's a great plan that nonprofits can take advantage of. So at this point, we've kind of demonstrated SharePoint, tied it back to how it can address some of the common challenges that organizations have typically been faced with. Drew gave us a great framework for how to go about planning for these implementations and addressing some of your IT initiatives. So at this point, I think we'll take any additional questions that have been chatted in, and I'll probably turn this over to Todd now.
Sure, just want to invite everyone to type in any questions they might have from the presentation. We'll give you a couple of minutes to look at that. I think one of the important things about this presentation in terms of thinking about information technology and nonprofits is that, just to draw on something that Drew said early in the presentation, is that not only do nonprofits need information technology solutions in the way that for-profit businesses do, they may even need it more because they are generally more strapped for resources and so need to rely on technological solutions to maybe do some of the work that you're unable to do when you have a small staff and a really big mission. So I think this is a really incredible opportunity for organizations to leverage what's out there and kind of eliminate some of the past headache that's been associated with managing your information technology. I don't see any more questions coming in, so I'd like to thank Drew and Jake for taking the time today to show us how we can engage in information technology and make best use of what's available. Do you guys have any final comments you'd like to make?
Really enjoyed being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I just wanted to also put the thought out there that if anybody has any follow-up questions, anything we talked about today, or wants to talk through a situation that you have in your nonprofit, please feel free to give us a call. Even a short half-an-hour conversation with either one of us, we have no challenges doing that. Even just on a no-charge basis for anyone out there. If you do need additional consulting, we're happy to provide that as well. But we're not stingy with our time, especially for the great nonprofits that are out there in our community. So please feel free to reach out and don't be shy about that.
Excellent. Well, thank you both, and I look forward to exploring more information technology. As I said earlier, this recording will be available on our website, and I'll be including links to further reading, more documents and things to think about, and maybe some supplemental materials that relate to things that were discussed in the presentation. Okay, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next month to talk about financial management.